There is a new multi-currency bot on the MT5 marketplace. The Xenox trader by Mr. Peter DeShepper looks to be a rather interesting bot as it trades a whole variety of different pairs using a strategy which does not appear to be overly manipulated. So I'm interested in diving into it today to see if it's a real bot and if this can actually help us all add some additional diversification to our bot portfolio. This video is sponsored by Prosperity Algo and our free Golden Time Bomb Expert Advisor. Do you want to make 100+% annual returns through automating the London breakout and the opening range breakout? Then click the link in the description. So starting off here with the actual description, it says that, like many bots on the MT5 page, that this is a state-of-the-art AI bot. And unfortunately, many times when people say that a bot uses AI, it doesn't actually use AI, and it's more of a marketing strategy. However, it can still very well be an excellent bot, provided that there's a real trading strategy behind it. So I'm quite curious to see what that actual technical analysis strategy might be, or if it actually does use AI as well. A few different points to note here is that bots can use AI really in two different manners. They can use either a pre-trained model like ChatGPT, so OpenAI's API, or they can use Claude or Gemini or Grok or one of the big standardized LLMs provided by many large tech companies. And if they do that, they would need to use web requests to be able to actually access the API. And if they do that, they would typically ask you to input a key, and I'm not seeing anything in regards to that here. However, the alternative method is you can actually custom train an AI model. So not a super complex one, like a random forest can be a machine learning model, or you can even do a very simple neural net and put that actually in the hard code of your bot. So maybe he's doing that here. However, he seems to be really chatting about reinforcement learning, which is extremely cutting edge technology. And I don't think is used overly often, at least in the retail trading space. So that is definitely spiking my skepticism a bit. Maybe he's doing something, but this is a bit too cutting edge of a technology to be seen effectively in expert advisors yet. So I'm a bit skeptical about the AI claims, but moving into the actual technical analysis side of things, which might make this actually quite a good strategy, is that apparently it's using a predefined stop loss and take profit for every single trade with a high risk reward ratio. And specifically, he's also mentioning that he prefers static take profits and stop loss as opposed to a trailing stop loss to reduce slippage. I personally have found that trailing stop losses are one of the best possible things that you can do in trading or expert advisor development in general, because they give you almost always a superior risk reward relative to a static stop loss. But that's also just my personal style and what I have found works well for me. Other developers, I'm sure, have different preferences or different techniques which they use, so nothing wrong with that. And he's using a variety of different pairs here, and supposedly it's more of a swing trading robot which is trend following, and it works on multiple pairs. So that's actually not a bad sign, because if it's able to make money on a whole basket of pairs, provided he hasn't over-optimized the indicators specifically for every single pair, that's actually a pretty good sign that it's reasonably robust. And he says that he did not over-optimize parameters and that its many different parameters are performing well, all of which is actually a pretty good sign. So because of that, I'm actually thinking that perhaps he is running a real strategy here. And even from the equity curves, we can see down here that for instance, it's not a absolutely beautiful, smooth equity curve. There are some dips in it, and that's actually a great sign because it appears to be a reasonably high leverage strategy, at least with basic input or default parameters. But the fact that we're seeing losses too is actually a really good sign. So now if we actually hop over to his signal page here, it's a fairly fresh signal. So it's been running for around a month, but it doesn't trade too frequently. So it looks good, but unfortunately there's just not a ton of trades here. So it's hard for us to see if it is statistically significant, but it does seem to be matching more of the swing trading style, which you mentioned. The trades are open for not a tremendous amount of time, but some of them are definitely open for quite a few hours, which is definitely kind of in alignment with what he's saying. So it does appear to be trading multiple different pairs, the pairs of which he is mentioning as well. So no complaints here so far. So yeah, we can now dive into MetaTrader as well, where I've taken the liberty of downloading the bot and running a quick back test, as you can see here. And I ran it on the gold chart because it's hard coded on different pairs. So it does trade gold, but it also trades Euro USD, and it trades a lot of the main major currency pairs. One thing to note is you will need to add the suffix and or the prefix for your broker, which is very common with these bots which are multi-currency based because they need to actually search for the symbol. And what we can see from the equity curve is that it does match what we're seeing on the sales page too. It's not perfect. We do see some pretty significant detachments from the equity and the balance line. To me, this usually is a good sign, or maybe not a good sign, but it's a sign that he's holding positions for a decent amount of time. We're also seeing some pretty significant drops, but if we go to the report, it doesn't look like a heavily manipulated strategy. It looks that under these default settings, he is using a fair amount of risk, but nothing overly crazy. So I guess if we go here to auto risk per settings, it's using 7.5%. So that would make total sense. Let's, for instance, run this here on a 1% risk per trade, just to see what that ends up looking like. It's a bit on the slower side here. I will pause the video for 2 seconds while this loads. Okay, so the back test with 1% risk is now complete. And as you guys can see, we obviously have much lower drawdowns here at only roughly 6%. But the total annual return here is only around 25%. So the return over drawdown is not spectacular for this type of system. So we're seeing a very high win rate with an inverted risk reward. So all of that actually does look legitimate. So it's not a high risk reward system, as he said. He's simply using or maybe he's using a stop and reverse, but he's closing trades earlier than he's letting them stop out, which is fine for this type of system as long as you have positive expected value. Like, you don't need to have a high win rate or a low win rate or a high risk reward, low risk reward. Really, all that matters is the combination of the two, getting to a positive expected value. And this system does look to be an honest, real system, but it's just not spectacular in my opinion so far. But to actually see what it's doing, I want to run a visual back test here. I have a feeling that it's an indicator heavy system. So it's an indicator heavy system on a bunch of different pairs. And he actually is using stop orders to enter. Yeah, we're seeing an RSI, we're seeing an ATR, a stochastic, a MACD. It's actually not a great sign, because I hope he's using the same indicators on the different bots. Because if he's using different, oh crap, yeah, okay, that's not a good sign. Because if he's using different length indicators on different pairs, oh yeah, okay, there appears to be ATRs on some of them. Like here, for instance, we're using a MACD 14, 17, 19. Here we're using a MACD 721, 8. We're using some buy stops, some sell stops. So yes, there is a real system here. It's not manipulated, but there is a lot of indicators. And the actual strategy appears to be optimized for each pair. At first, I thought that maybe he'd be using a bunch of indicators, but it would still be reasonably robust because he'd be running across so many pairs with the same settings. And if he managed to find something which works across 6 or 7 different pairs with the same indicator settings, that is a pretty decent robustness test. So it's not perfect, but if you can still have some sort of consistency across a bunch of different pairs, that is a pretty good sign. Unfortunately here, because he has optimized a bunch of different indicators on a bunch of different pairs, like you're looking at probably 12 or so different parameters which have been optimized for. And if you're optimizing across 12 different parameters, even if it's different pairs, your odds of overfitting are quite high. So I'm not saying that it's a bad system. This looks to be an honest system. There's no manipulation. And I venture the developer believes that this is a great bot. I'm not so sure how long it would hold up long term, but it's probably not horrible either. So maybe to kind of give